Hello there, one and all, and welcome to episode 9 of our masterclass series, the series of interviews here on this channel where we delve a little bit deeper than we normally would into certain aspects of the perfume industry. We are continuing by looking at various ingredients, and once again, I'm very, very happy and very, very fortunate to have in our virtual studio Remi Pulverail of Les Indemodables and the Atelier Francais Des Matieres, who's joining us from southeastern France. How are you doing today, Remi? How are things in your corner of the world?
Yeah, fine. Everything fine. I didn't catch a cold as you, so you see, it's raining a lot, like in London, probably. But
I'm recovering, but I can almost sort of sense from the darkness, and because you're in your office, which is sometimes you're in your wife's shop, but today you're and you can almost feel the darkness outside the window. Now, today we're going to be looking at two particularly interesting ingredients. They're always interesting, but I think few are more interesting than ambergris. And one thing that we have to establish is that in England, I don't think we have yet decided exactly how we're supposed to pronounce it. Some people say ambergris, some people say ambergris. Just for the sake of consistency, today I'm going to sort of say ambergris. But first, we're going to start with labdanum. And labdanum also, ancient material used by ancient civilizations, I believe, for hundreds and thousands of years. But I think now I'm right in saying mostly used just in perfumery, but maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. Now, the story of labdanum nowadays is linked very, very, very much to Spain. So why don't you take the story away and tell us about labdanum's particular connection with Spain and why it is that Spain has become such an important factor in the labdanum market, if I can call it that.
Yeah, thank you, Darius, for the introduction. Actually, yeah, tonight we are going to review two very important supply chains and products. The first one, as you said, Ambergris, has almost vanished from the perfume creation and industry. And the second one is the cistus Labdanum supply chain, which is the main source in natural ingredients of the Ambergris olfactory family and Ambergris ingredients, apart from the synthetic ones. So yes, I don't know with which one you want to start.
No, we'll start. I think we start with the labdanum because I have a feeling that we're going to have maybe a little bit more to say about the ambergris. So if we start with labdanum, now for anybody who hasn't smelt labdanum, what would be the perfume that you would most recommend people to smell to get an idea of what labdanum absolute smells like? For example, for me, I think Serge Lutens' Ambre Sultan is like quite a good reference, isn't it? What's another one that you think really highlights labdanum?
Yeah. Probably it's you have it in a lot. It's a key ingredient for the Oriental family, for sure. It's also a main ingredient when you build and when you create a ship together with patchouli. So it's a warm smell, which is a bit leathery, which is yes, very warm. And what are the big perfume? So in all the leathery, I would say Oriental. You're right with the Serge Lutens Ambre Sultan. You could also talk about a few classical Guerlain that use this note. Probably also some Chanel. If you take a Miss Dior, if you take or even in Guerlain Habit Rouge, you have all these notes.
No, that's a great list to be starting with, and of course we'll also talk about your perfume from Les Indemodables, which features it, but I think we'll talk about that one a little bit more when we get onto the ambergris. And the story of labdanum is very, very closely connected with Spain nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how did that happen? How come no other countries really seem to be part
Yes,
of the story?
that's a good question. Actually, cyst, which is the name of the plant, Cistus labdaniferus, is
Yeah.
a plant that is growing all over the Mediterranean countries. So you see, you find it in the past in Chypre, you have it in Corsica, you have it in many in Greece, you have it in many and in Spain, of course. But you see, it's a plant. You have it, yes, also in Provence a little bit. Bon. But these are the main countries, so you can find it in really many countries. But as you say, today the main supply, 90% of the supply, is coming from Spain and from the Andalusia region in the south of Spain. Alors,
Right.
the reason is always the same, Dariush. The reason is, I would say, sociological reasons, where you have this kind of combination between a crop, between labor force, which are the gypsies in Spain, and also between entrepreneurs, which who are going to try to have some connection with the perfume business. And as for all the crops, you see, if we talk about the spices in Asia,
Mm.
we have spices in every single country of Asia, all the spices, the nutmeg, the clove, the cardamom or whatever, the ginger. But the production, larger scale production, only exists in a few countries, and some are leaders and some do not participate to the fragrance and flavors industry, because you didn't have also a combination between this cultivation, labor force to harvest the plants, and extraction, because as you know, to be able to use a natural plant, you need to extract it before using in a fragrance formula. So all this combination of expertise, if you don't gather it at the right place and at the right time, you will not have sustainable supply chain. So this is the case for Cyste labdanum. Before, it was really a bit archaic process, and today, let's say, it's you really have a big available plantation close to Huelva in the Andalusia region of
Mm.
Spain, and also you have these nomadic gypsies,
Mm.
yes, that settled there tens of years ago. And they are not doing only the harvesting of cyst, but for them it's a good source of revenue. Some of them are also involved in the catering of the black pigs, you see, that are used to make the famous ham, pata
Right.
negra. Pata negra, yes. So that's from the same region.
But you
So
know,
yeah,
Remy, sorry to interrupt you, but as you're telling this story, I mean, and I have some questions about the story as well. It's just fascinating so often in this industry, which in many ways seems so modern, that some of the production side of things feels, in some ways, you use the word archaic. I might say the word primitive. That there just happen to be some like traveler communities who
yeah,
do the harvesting.
yeah,
It just seems bizarre. Like, for example, we should go back a few steps, because the way that, correct me if I'm wrong with any of these,
yeah,
but there is this plant that, like you said, the cistus ladaniferus, which I think some people also call the rock rose. It produces these very, very, very delicate
yeah. Quite
white flowers. I think you described them as the petals being so thin that they're almost transparent, and because of the extreme heat of the regions where it grows, um, the plant actually produces this stuff
them
that we then
and the
extract, called
resin.
labdanum, as a defense mechanism. But
Yeah,
the way that it's extracted is that literally everything has to be cut. And you said as well that still a lot of that cutting, a lot of that harvesting is done by hand using
yeah.
sickles. And then there is the process of boiling it, and adding various ingredients. It, how come that hasn't been industrialized? How come so much of that is still done by hand? It just
Yeah.
seems so strange.
Yeah, as we said during some of our master classes, Dariusz, if you remember, the perfume industry in particular, and the supply chain which are connected to the perfume business, are still very, very small because we are not in the mass production. So this is why these supply chain are so important for the, I would say, for the local population wherever in the world, by the way, because this is this is family agriculture compared to the industrial agriculture. And because it's a small market, you see, and Sister Labdanum is a bit the same as you can take Ilang Ilang in Comoros, you can take many of the supply chain that we use in the perfume business are very small scale and still involving families, therefore communities. And it's not a big domain, you see, where you have a big investor that has purchased thousands of hectares, like in Brazil, like for the palm in Malaysia, like you see some huge crop like rice, like soya, you see, which are massive crops. This is not the case in our industry because we are a niche industry, even if everybody uses perfume and especially the natural ingredients, which are quite expensive. So it remains very small supply chain, 1,000 smaller than the big one we could talk about. And this is why, as you say, you still have these traditional way of operating.
I guess that's what's interesting is because, you know, you and I talk a lot. I do these videos where I'm constantly interacting with people who love perfume so much and spend a lot of money on perfume and have very, very large perfume collections. I suppose we forget that in the bigger context, this passion that we have, this interest that we have, it is actually quite small. It is still quite niche. And then, as you say, if we add on to that the fact that we're talking here about a natural ingredient, which is then even a smaller proportion of what is already a small industry, I guess that sort of helps to explain it. But I still find it really, really fascinating that in 2023, in the information you send me, you say that it's still traveler communities that go around with a sickle, using.
You see that the case also, for example, in Bulgaria for the rose crop. It's
right.
also this kind of nomadic or communities that are coming and harvesting the roses in May every year. Because you see also, Dariusz, the reason behind that is the fact that most of these crops, especially florals, are very short crops, so you cannot just make a living with this crop because it's 3 weeks or 1 month a year and that's it.
So what is the case with Labdanum? When is the harvesting time supposed to happen?
It's summer. It's between, let's say, July and July, August, September. You see, more or less, when it's really hot. And
then actually 3 months in the context of perfumery is actually in a way quite a long harvest period, isn't it?
Exactly.
With something. And have you personally had contact with these traveler communities? Like, what is the supply chain for you, for your Labdanum that you use?
For us, I've been there several times, so we have a direct contact with a kind of cooperative, or it's quite an old guy, but who has been working with these gypsies communities for tens of years. So he has a direct supply over there, and he organized the collect and the processing of the plants. And that's very interesting because that's also a good match between the local Spanish people and these communities, which are now no more nomadic people. So they really live there all year long. So they cannot be considered anymore as nomadic. And they still have their tradition. It's very funny because they have a tradition which are quite different from the Spanish one, but now that have been integrated in the culture of the region, and that's quite interesting because you have these communities that are living together quite well.
What sort of traditions do you mean? Can you think of any examples?
Yeah, this is the tradition of the Virgin, and they come. There is a kind of ceremony every year where they ride very nice horses, and they are making a kind of gift to the Virgin. And actually, during the ceremony, they offer these cistus white flowers, and they make so you see the cistus crop is part of the of the ceremonies and of the culture, because it's an important sorry, let me
we'll let you go and answer the phone. While Remi is doing that, I should say, if you have got any questions for him about labdanum and also about the upcoming ingredient we're going to be talking about, ambergris, do feel free to put the questions in the chat. I'm already keeping a note of a few very, very interesting ones that have been posed. So Remi, just to go back to their rituals and their traditions, apart from this sort of symbolic, I can see why, you know, using a white flower for Holy Mary would actually sort of work, would be quite symbolic. But apart from that, do they use the labdanum for anything?
No. Labdanum is really a monetary revenue for them, and that's why they make a good living with this crop. As you said just before, you have two different processes, because you use the cyst that you distill, or you can make a solvent extraction, and you get some extract for the perfumery, which belong to the cyst, which are the cyst derivatives, or you make the extraction, you isolate the gums, which is on the leaves, as you explained, which is protecting the plant from the heat in summertime. So you have this kind of resins that form on the leaves, and the people they they isolate the leaves, and they make a kind of gum, which is the labdanum, and this labdanum will give a second family of ambergris extract. So you see, it's you got some extract that I sent you.
Yes, and we should talk about that, because one is the sort of, I suppose we could call the traditional labdanum absolute, which smells like all of those perfumes we talked about. You know, very, very, very faceted. I think we also don't talk enough about the fact that it has a very, very definite herbal facet as well. You know, something almost of burnt herbs. But you've also sent the cistus essential oil. So could you explain to us how that's extracted then?
Yeah, the cistus essential oil. Yeah, which is extracted
that comes
from the stems and the leaves that you just harvest. You see, by hand, as you said, and so it's a simple distillation of the full plant.
But that smells quite different from what we normally call labdanum, doesn't it?
Labdanum is probably richer and more oriental, I would say. You don't have all the top notes that you have in the cistus oil, which is quite terpenic, and you see, so it's a different smell. Cistus oil, you can really use it as a top note, and labdanum is really a kind of fixative. You see that you will have more to give some.
But this essential oil, I almost find quite unattractive. There is something, you know, the labdanum absolute is very, very warm, very enveloping, very welcoming. This feels like a really, really strong, quite angry kind of eucalyptus territory. So why is this used sometimes? I mean, what qualities does this bring to a perfume?
Alors, yes, it's used in the top notes of perfumes, and when you really want to have in combination with other ambergris molecules, might they be natural or synthetic, by the way, and it is really used when you want to have this ambergris accord all along the evaporation curve, and but it's quite difficult to manipulate the cistus oil.
In what sense?
Because it's a bit aggressive, and
Right.
you see, you need to combine it with other ingredient, because when you smell it like that, as you said, it's not
No,
very
it's quite it can be quite harsh. And then you've also sent me something that the label says it's a hydrocarbo resin.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
So this is I would say a purification and another extraction from this family. So it's a more complex extract, which is very, very interesting. And
what does that come from? So you said it's like a secondary one. So does that mean what does it come from first?
From cistus.
Right, but like, does it go more down the sort of absolute way, or that what?
Yeah, you have a kind of a cracking process as well. Cracking process, it means that you go to a very, very high temperature, and you almost burn during the extraction. So that's another process that gives yes, a different profile, maybe a bit more smoky, a bit more leathery, you see, than the absolute, the Labdanum absolute, but it's a very, very nice really extract.
It is really, really fascinating comparing the three of them, because this one, I need to remember the name of it. The hydrocarbo resin feels maybe somewhere in between the two in a way. It doesn't feel so hot, even though it is smoky and leathery, but also at the same time it doesn't feel quite so animalic. And out of the three of them, which one is used most frequently in perfumery, would you say?
All of them, because you see, it's a really different product with different facets, or in combination. But I would say that hydrocarboresin is not much used nowadays, unfortunately, because it's a quite expensive product. I'm just checking the yes, the hydrocarboresin process. Yeah, you see, it's a kind of quite complex chemistry behind the you see the cyst concrete, and then the absolute, and yeah, not many fragrance houses are still using it. It was a raw process at the beginning. You see, so it's a very old process that has been designed by Rohr. Many of the cyst labdanum extract, by the way, have been designed by the Rohr chemists at the time in Grasse, who were the best in the industry. And now you still have a lot of these recipes that are key in the natural ingredient space in the perfume industry.
And we just a couple more questions on Labdanum, because we need to move on to everybody's favorite whale excretion. We have this situation where we're talking about the traveler communities, and okay, I know you make the point that they're not actually traveling anymore, and for them this is a source of their income. But it sounds as though it's a kind of informal arrangement, and also these are plants that are growing wild, I believe you said, so it's not that they're growing on somebody's plot of land that they've devoted to growing.
Yes and no, because we could say that it's a wild plant. Yes, actually, because it's quite a vast region where you have this plant, and but it still belongs to a vast agricultural domain that belongs to some people. So you see, it's not totally wild. So
okay, so my question on the back of that was going to be, is this process at the moment anyway secure, or are we in a situation where somebody might turn around and say, oh, I don't want to be growing this Labdanum anymore, we're going to move on to something else?
No, because in this region, which is very dry and very hot in summertime, you don't have many crops, fortunately, that could be growing. So it's still interesting for the landowners to rent during the season their fields to these communities. So
Right.
they give them the right to harvest on their domain.
And speaking of climate, this is a question that I had on my list, but I'm glad somebody else asked it. Karen is saying Spain had a very, very hot summer. Will climate change have a long-term impact on the availability? Now, from what you're saying, it sounds as though these plants really like the heat, but there must also be a kind of limit for them. So is anybody seeing the effects of climate change on that? Thank you for the question, by the way, Karen.
I think, unfortunately, we see the climate change on every single, and this is the difficulty, the higher and higher difficulty to be a farmer today, because they will have to face incredible situation, not only one time every 10 years, but maybe one time every 5 years. Having said that, for the cistus labdanum supply chain, as it is a dry region and a dry climate, you see, it's not a big deal if the temperature move from 35 to 45, because this is more or less. So it's a plant that loves the dryness and the heat. So you see, I don't think it will be one of the most impacted in the picture of all the naturals we have been talking about.
I suppose one impact might be that actually there's going to be more of the cistus, which then has an impact on some other plants in a way.
Yeah. Then you still have, of course, it's not, as you say, solely a single crop, and it's also the question of the other sources of revenues for the communities, because if the people make a living with some other crops that do not sell or do not work anymore, maybe they will want to move to another place, and if you don't have anymore the labor force, even if you still have a very good cistus labdanum, the supply chain will be dead. So you see, it's not only the question of the climate change, this is also the question of the migrations of the people that we absolutely need to harvest these crops.
No, and yes, and that's the main lesson we have learned through all of these masterclass episodes is just how interconnected and fragile everything is. So we should move on, and as we're nearly at the half-hour mark, I will just remind everybody that you're watching episode 9 of our masterclass series with Remi Pulverail of the Atelier Francais Des Matieres. And today we're talking about Labdanum and Ambergris. We've just finished our discussion on Labdanum, although if you have any more questions on Labdanum, I'm sure we could put them to Remi. And this is a good moment as we move on to Ambergris to talk about the fact that the structure we have followed through this series, the reason why we have paired certain materials with each other is because that is how they've been paired in the perfumes that you've released under the brand Les Indemodables that you've founded with your wife Valerie. And the perfume that we're kind of focusing on today is Ombre Suprême, one of your newer ones, composed by Antoine Lee. And one of its remarkable features is that it contains an extremely high dosage, or at least this is what you tell me, an extremely high dosage of natural ambergris, of real ambergris.
10%.
So how much was that? Say that again.
10%.
10%, which is a lot. People are going to have some questions about that. Yeah. So we should talk about ambergris in relation to that perfume. But I think maybe, shall we start by, have you got something to show us, Remi?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Go on then.
Yeah, something that I can tell you, even in the perfume business, very few people have seen. So right. That's one of the first ingredients that I saw when I started in perfumery. So this is our one piece of our Ambergris, natural Ambergris block, from which we produce in-house our own ultrasound tincture.
That looks like a big piece.
Oh yeah. It's we have a bit more than 1 kg at the lab. So yes, that's a good piece.
Come on. Let's just start with them, because this is a product where it's almost ridiculous talking about supply chains because it's completely unpredictable. For the few of you who may not be aware, if you're watching, that thing that Remi just held up is an excretion or a secretion from a whale, a particular type of whale. Remi, what do you think? Because I know that at the moment we're not even sure whether it comes from the front of the whale or from the back of the whale. What's your thinking about where it comes from?
I don't know. We know basically that the whales eat squids. You see,
right?
And the squids they have of course the squids they have the beak that is a problem for the whales. So basically they expel.
It irritates their insides,
irritating the stomach, and therefore they need to expel it to avoid being killed or injured by the beaks of the squids. And these block, huge block, because you can see the size of the whale. So the block probably sometimes 10 to 50 kg are sometimes arriving on beaches. So we know more or less where it can arrive, because
but you haven't answered my question about whether you think it comes from the front of the whale or the back.
No, the front.
Okay, so it's a sort of vomit reaction.
That's
it comes out.
That's what the scientist.
And then I think I'm right in saying as well that it has to float on the surface of the sea for many, many years, and it has to have the action of the sun on it.
Yeah, we don't know. All this we don't really know,
Right.
because it can be months, it can be years, depending on the flow and on the stream of the sea. So if they are close to coast, maybe it's only a few months. If they are far, and depending on the stream, all this is what I love in this ingredient, that it's totally unpredictable, totally impossible to standardize, and every box is different. Even if we have some quite strict, when we select it and when we buy it, quite strict, I would say, olfactive properties that we are searching.
Sort of standards that you're looking for, almost.
We have some standards. We are looking in the Ambergris. You need to have of course, animalic facet. You need to have the mineral facet, and you need to have the salty facet. So if you have a good balance between these three, and also we check with our machine and equipment, technical equipment, if there is no adulteration, if it has not been cut with some fatty or oil or whatever. So we need to check the purity also, what we can do, because now we have a good knowledge of this ingredient. So today, this ingredient is no more used in perfumery. We are probably the last to still use it, because
hold that thought about the using it and everything, because I want to come back to that. But that particular piece, where is it from?
Alors, the first we bought in the lab 4 years or 5 years ago was from France, close to the Bordeaux region, and this one is from Sumatra in Indonesia. So basically, you have some people, we know, depending on the migration of the whales and depending on the climatic events, more or less where it can arrive, in which region you can find some. And then you have this kind of hunters who are in some countries sometimes calling us, because they have some dogs that they train to identify the smell of the blocks, a bit like truffles, you see, Darius.
Yes.
And sometimes they find something. It looks like a stone on the beach. It's very difficult.
Well, this is what I've always heard, that the problem is that if you were looking on a beach,
exactly,
you wouldn't necessarily spot it. Have you ever found a piece you put yourself?
No, not ourselves. There are
but I'm saying, have you just happened to have found one or not?
No. It's people who contact us, or the network that we have, and sometimes we have. Sometimes people ask us also to analyze some blocks because they want to resell it. You see, in the Middle East, they use it also for some other purposes. The rich people, they buy it. They think it's a big. This is the phantasm of you see the sexual performance. It improves the sexual.
that it's an aphrodisiac.
Yeah, so you have a different.
Okay.
You see a phantasm and thoughts around that. So it's not only used in our, of course,
So
business.
we need to talk about price then. But I'm not going to be so indiscreet as to ask you how much you paid for yours, even though but if I happened to be really
Yeah,
lucky and I found a piece on a beach that was, I don't know, let's say 2 kilos,
yeah,
and then if I contacted LVMH,
yes,
what kind of a price should I not go under for a 2 kilos? Let's say it was a good quality, let's say it was a
yeah.
nice, etc., etc. 2
Or
kilos would be about what?
alors first, LVMH probably doesn't use it anymore because you see it's animal ingredients. So many
Okay.
houses now are not using it anymore. As I told you, the big houses don't use anymore because it's very expensive. You will pay only the block. So I don't talk about the extract, which is
No,
even more expensive. The block,
sure.
a good block will cost more than 20,000 euro a kg.
20,000 euros for a kilogram.
Yeah.
So everybody watching now, get out there and start looking on the beaches of near Bordeaux and in Indonesia. How many kilos roughly are found every year? Do we know?
No, nobody knows and nobody will never know. It's absolutely non-transparent supply chain.
It's fascinating. So did
which
you
makes
buy
the,
yours?
which makes the beauty of it.
Did you buy yours directly from the person who found it?
No, no, for
Okay.
sure not. No, for sure not. Sometimes some hunters contact us directly, but not for this block specifically. You see, so it's as I told you, it's a network of people that we know who knows directly hunters. Myself, I don't know directly hunters. I've been contacted 6 months again by a very nice guy, by the way, who was living in New Zealand, a retired guy, and he told me, yes, I'm sure I have some Ambergris. I told him, okay, send me some samples because we need to check. And actually, it was not Ambergris at all. It was a kind of volcanic, you see, stone, and so he was a bit deceived. But we did analyze this for him to check. But you see, a lot of people think that they have it, and also sometimes we got some qualities which are adulterated. So it's very difficult to identify and to find a very good
So
quality.
so do you mean that the block is adulterated?
Yeah, they put you add something else inside because
Gosh,
it's very expensive. So you mix it with oil, with fat, with whatever you want, which is a bit
right.
the same color as the block. And the people become very clever when there is a lot of money. Huh?
And so you told me as well that there is quite a complex kind of quality control system. One of the things that I've heard, and maybe you can tell me whether this is true or not, or whether it's a myth, that apparently if you sort of rub your hands on a block of ambergris and then rub your hands together like that, when you smell it, if you get like a really strong smell of the sea and of that animalic facet, then that means maybe you've got a good quality. Is that something that's done, or is that complete
No,
rubbish?
it's more scientific than that. You see, because
Right. Okay.
no, it's so expensive that maybe the very rich people are doing that. I don't know, but as for us, we are first, as I told you, we have standards, and second, we have a very state-of-the-art technical equipment, so to check really the quality and also to smell it and to try it into formulas. So we are very cautious before buying a block to make sure that this is the adequate quality. Because from this block that you've seen, then we make the tincture using the ultrasound technology, and it takes a few months we have a specific process to make the extract that you have.
Yes. And actually, you mentioned the tincture. That's a good point for me to bring in a question that somebody asked. You know, a few minutes ago, you said that your formula for Ambre Suprême contains 10% of the ambergris. The question is it 10% of a tincture that is already diluted, or is it 10% pure ambergris? How does that work? Because, for example, the one you
diluted.
the one
No, you can imagine it's diluted, but it's still very, very powerful because basically you capture and you concentrate all the interesting aromatic components of the product. That's always the same when you make an extraction.
like this one that you sent me here, which I think people will be able to see, is a really, really dark color. What kind of percentage dilution is that? The one that you sent me?
This one is 10% for the smelling.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the tincture that you use in your Ombre Suprême is also diluted at 10%, or is it?
Yes. It's more or less this percentage, depending on the batch. Depending, it can vary a little bit, but you see. So you will smell alcohol at first, and then
Oh no, I'm straight in there with
you're
the.
straight in it. Okay,
It's
and then you can keep it for days.
Surprisingly animalic,
Yes.
actually.
But you have also the mineral and the salty facet. And in the perfume, the idea in Ambre Suprême, what we try to do, and Antoine tried to do, because this was a bit the brief and the objective. It was really, you see, the Ambergris is a very fragile ingredient, because if you use it with too strong ingredients, you will kill it in the formula. So the idea was really to highlight all the facet, the delicate facet of Ambergris, to really be able to identify it when you use the perfume. And so it was quite difficult to create this formula, because we wanted to keep really all the facet of ambergris without having something too strong that will really hide or destroy this authentic smell and wonderful smell of the natural ambergris.
So just to go back to that question, so that I'm clear in my head, would it actually, if in my very, very basic way of understanding how a perfume formula works, would it actually be in a way also accurate to say that in the overall formula of Ambre Suprême, 1% is ambergris? If you're talking about the fact that it's
yes, more or less
10%, which is okay. So that I can understand that. Lots and lots of questions about it. This is an interesting question. Gavin says, do you X-ray the block before you buy it?
No, we don't.
Well, that wouldn't show anything. It wouldn't prove anything.
The block, it would not be useful, because it's not. I would say it will not give us some clue about the quality, because you still have some pieces of the beak. For instance, in some block, every block is different, because you see it's animalic. So yes, if you X-ray, you will see exactly the probably the different pieces, which are more or less solid, which are probably bones or not bones, or you see. So yes, but it will not give us
It wouldn't help. It wouldn't prove anything.
No, it wouldn't help from an olfactive standpoint and the purity standpoint.
Lots of people also, when you showed the block, were asking about the color. So Power Connection says, does the color indicate anything?
No.
Gavin says, does the black indicate its age or quality?
No, nothing.
Okay, interesting.
No, nothing. You see this. You see, this one looks like it's really, really dark. It's really like a volcano stone. You see almost, but sometimes it's clearer. Yeah. It depends. It depends. This one, that's the first time I see a block with such a black color. Very.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. Woozy says, how hard is it to forecast the ambergris supply on a year-by-year basis? I mean, I suppose the answer is that actually
it's forecast. So you need to
it's
stock.
Impossible, isn't it? Yeah.
We always keep quite a big stock of several years, because we don't want to be in a position where we need the block to produce our perfume formulas and be short of material. So that's why we always keep several years of stock of ambergris, and we go back to identify some new potential blocks very early before we are out of stock, you see, because it can be very long. The process can last more than a year.
Okay, so you've answered the question that I was just going to ask, that, for example, you, with your position in the industry, with your reputation, with all the work you've done, if you wanted to just go out and buy an Ambergris block tomorrow,
yeah,
that would actually not be so easy.
No, not so easy. No, not so easy.
Okay.
Probably we would have a lot of proposal, but some would be no. For me, my planning is that I say at worst it will spend 1 year. So we start being on the market for Ambergris, let's say 18 months before we are out of stock.
That is really, really fascinating. A question from Rachel, who says, is there an official grading institution or grading body for Ambergris? You know, is there like a sort of official classification system or something? Nothing.
This is what is wonderful. There is nothing. There is absolutely nothing. And Guerlain was a big. I have one of my friend was making at that time the olfactive control with the Guerlain Ambergris, and the first house where I was working in Charabot in Grasse. At that time, they were still using Ambergris, so I really know it well. No, there is no institution, and I would say that each probably of the rare fragrance house that still use it, I think there is almost no more, because they all use the synthetic grade, which is cheaper and of course easier to supply. Each fragrance house has its own, I would say, probably olfactive standards, because maybe some people will look for more mineral or salty, look for less animalic facets. So you see, each block is different. So you will never have 2 times the same block, of course, because so you need to manage that. And I think it's such a complex olfactive profile that probably some fragrance or perfume house have a little bit different standards when they evaluate a new block.
And another thing that we haven't talked about yet, even though it's been mentioned a little bit in the chat, is that it's a product that comes from an animal, which is increasingly an issue and a problem for some people. I was wondering what your view on that is, because I've always found Ambergris to be in a kind of category of its own, because yes, obviously it has come from an animal, but not only has the animal not been harmed in you taking this product,
exactly.
the animal doesn't even know.
No, that's a waste. Basically, we value a waste. You see, Darius?
Yes.
And it's an animalic waste, but it's still a waste. Like the Pierre d'Afrique, by the way, that we are also using, which is a fossil, animalic fossil, but where we don't harm anybody, any animal. So that's why at our lab we have decided to ban all the animalic ingredients.
Right.
And we only still use Ambergris because, as you say, it's a non-harmful sourcing and process.
Yes, and I mean there will be some people who just object to having anything from animals on their skin, full stop. But that's a different consideration. And obviously, that if you know that's fine. We also should talk about these synthetic substitutes that you've mentioned over the course of the last few minutes. It's impossible to talk about Ambergris without talking about synthetic substitutes. Are there some that you find that are better than others? For example, I'll just put this question up. This is from, I'm just going to say JC, who says, I hope there will be a discussion on whether Ambergris these days automatically means ambroxan, which I find disgusting and intolerable. Does it usually mean ambroxan?
Alors, ambroxan has nothing to do with Ambergris, but you're right. Sorry, I don't remember the first name. I've not seen the first name of the person who asked the question, but yes, this is one of the common ingredients that is supposed to replace Ambergris, but if you smell it, it has nothing to do.
No.
Basically, ambroxan or ambrofix, whatever the commercial name, because many big players in the fragrance industry are producing these synthetic molecules, which is starting from the clary sage. So it's starting from a natural plant, But then you have many chemical process, and at the end of the day, of course, it's no longer natural because you have a lot of chemistry behind. But I would say that this ambroxan or ambrofix is probably closer to the cistus labdanum smell, but not at all ambergris. It has nothing really animalic. It's more ambery. So no, you cannot compare it at all to the ambergris.
So what is, in your opinion, an acceptable synthetic substitute, or is there one?
No, you don't have anyone. Really, you don't have anyone. Sometimes you have some people who make some reconstitution, you see, but it's already a kind of formula that will try to match or to come close to the ambergris. But we cannot talk about an ingredient because this is already a perfume formula. So this is possible. But I would say
like an accord, almost like an ambergris accord.
Exactly, like an accord. So it's another story. But I would say in terms of in the synthetic palette, single synthetic molecules, you have nothing close or even a bit close to ambergris, nothing. And of course, in the natural space also. No, ambergris is totally unique. Totally unique. And for me, what is incredible, especially in this perfume, Ambre Suprême, but in many formula, because we use it also in other of the Indemodables products, perfumes, is the impact of this ingredient, because you cannot plan the impact of the ingredient. You see Ambre Suprême, if you put it on the skin, the top notes are very fresh. So you say, oh, okay, it's a nice, and you start to smell it a little bit. And when you keep it on your skin, after 1 or 2 hours, the power of the perfume increases like hell. And yes, this is a very, and it gives some elegance to the perfume. It's difficult to explain, and but you can see and you can smell when you put ambergris in a formula and when you remove it. You see, usually in the other formula where we use it, it's a very small dosage. Ambre Suprême is a bit an exception because here it's overdosage. But yes, the impact is very unpredictable as well of this mystery ingredient.
So whose idea was it to make a perfume with such a high percentage of the natural ambergris? You know, what was it? Was it Valerie's idea?
Yes, because no, it was Antoine also was really willing to explore this ingredient in a massive dosage, and for us also it was. But this is probably the most mythical ingredient in today in perfumery.
When did the big perfume houses stop using it so much? Because am I right that in the past 90s, they did use it? Things like
the 90s. Because when I started in the perfumery, it was early 90s, and it was really the last years. I would say that late 90s, it was almost no more used. A bit in some of the old formula from Guerlain, from Chanel, from these houses. Yes, but now I think they have substituted in the formula, first because it's very expensive, second because it's very difficult to find, and third because they have the regulatory constraints in these big groups where they will just say we remove all the animalic ingredients, that's it.
We've got some more questions that we should finish with. Rachel is saying, how much ambergris is in your cologne Escale en Indonésie, which I haven't tried yet. Is there any ambergris in it?
Yes, of course. Yes, there is. Well, there is less than Ambre Suprême, of course, because first Cologne has a lower dosage in fragrance.
Sure.
So I would say half, but half divided by also the percentage. You have 20% dosage in of the fragrance in the Ambre Suprême perfume, and Cologne is probably around 4% or something like that. So you see the fragrance dosage is much lower in the Cologne.
But it's having an impact. Gavin is asking about the whales themselves, whether you know something about the whales. Gavin says sperm whales are vulnerable in terms of conservation status. So has the availability depleted recently of ambergris? Are you finding that there's less ambergris around?
Frankly speaking, we don't know. What I
Right.
can say is that until there is a market for some other businesses than perfume, because today perfume is almost no more using it. So there is
Sure.
no more market anymore for the perfumery. So fortunately, there are some other usage. So until there is this market, you will have people that will try to sell it and to find it, therefore. But it's difficult to measure the impact of the whales conservation and the number you see with the availability of the blocks,
Sure.
because as I told you just before, it's such a non-transparent market that I don't know. I really don't know.
No, it's fascinating. And even we had a book about it a few years ago, didn't we, called Floating Gold. But that, I don't know if any of you out there have read it, but I did not think that that was the best perfume book I've ever read. And maybe that's because it is very, very difficult to spin a whole book out of that subject. Final question, Remi. What is the largest block of ambergris that you have personally ever seen?
The bigger I've seen was in 95. We had it in how would you say, like a bank coffre-fort.
What, in a safe? In a
Yeah. You see, it was a 20-kilo block.
Whoa.
In one piece, in one single piece. Yeah.
Where was that found? Do you know?
No, I don't know. Frankly speaking, at that time, I was not very much aware of this sourcing. It was not, by the way.
And who are you able to say who had it? Whose block of
Yes,
ambergris was it?
it's one of the perfume house we were talking about that will still using it. So it was in the 90s. At
Wow.
least it was purchased to serve this kind of clients.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Because
Huge.
20 kilos would have
20 kg is big.
you could have kept that going for a long time, couldn't you, I think?
Especially in one piece. No, but at that time, you see, Dariush, in the 80s, 70s, 80s, the major perfume were still using it quite a lot. Quite a lot. As the volume.
And how does it have to be stored? Does it have to be kept cold in a fridge or something, or does it not get damaged?
Of course, it should not melt. So yes, you keep it at I would say a controlled temperature between maybe 5 and 15 degrees, not more.
Okay. Right. Well, on that note, everybody's going to go hunting on the beaches tomorrow with their hunter dogs. Yeah, let us know. Get in touch with Remi, or maybe don't get in touch with LVMH. I don't know. Remi, thank you so much for your time, as always. Thank you very much for giving up your time to do all of these episodes with us and to share your expertise. Thank you very much to all of you for your questions. Really, really wonderful exchange, as always. And stay tuned for information about the next masterclass coming your way at some point soon. But until then, thank you very much, Remi, and goodbye, everybody. Yes. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Dariush. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.